Hello my dear students, in this video we are going to study chapter number 10 called inheritance. Let us have introduction. One of the important concepts of OOPS is inheritance. C++ supports inheritance. So C++ allows the class to create one more new class. So that is called derived class from the existing class. So that is base class. So here the derived class consisting of all the features of the base class in addition to having its own properties. Inheritance is a capability of one class to inherit its properties from another class. Now let us study what do you mean by base class. It is a class which inherits all the properties to another class is called as a base class. Now let us study what do you mean by derived class. It is a class which inherits all the properties from another class is called as derived class. Now let us study the advantages of using inheritance. The first one is reusing existing code, and the second one is faster development time, and the third one is easy to extend, fourth one is easy to maintain, and the fifth one is memory utilization. Suppose X is a class which is already defined and we need to create one more class called Y which consisting of all the properties of X and it has got its own properties. So here in this case there are certain drawbacks which as follows. The first one is if you want to execute all the features which are present in the X, so again it has to be executed and it takes more amount of memory. So that is one limitation. And the second limitation is it has to execute all those instructions which are already present in the class X, so which takes a lot of time. Hence inheritance avoids this kind of overhead and it is going to solve this type of overhead. The class Y inherit all the properties from X and it has got its own properties. The class X is called as the base class and the class Y is called as derived class. Now let us study defining a derived class. So let us take the first syntax. Here you can see class, derived class name, colon, and then we are going to write visibility mode and then the base class name. So curly open brace, and here we are going to write members of the class, curly closing brace, and then put semicolon. Now let us take example to show how exactly the derived class can be defined using different visibility modes. Now let us define class father and then curly open brace. Here we are going to write private char name and then int age and then public member access specifier char caste and then int boys, int girls, and then we can write void read data and then void print data, curly closing brace, and put semicolon. So next we are going to write the derived class. So here we'll write class son and then colon public and then father, curly open brace, private char company and then float salary, public void get data, void display. So curly closing brace and then put semicolon. So here the class son is the derived class. So here you can see the changes in the visibility mode. So first one is public and the next one is private and the next one is protected. Now let us study visibility mode. The visibility mode, that is private, public and protected, in the definition of the derived class specifies whether the features of the base class is derived privately, publicly or protectedly derived. Now we'll study public inheritance. The public members of the base class is public in the derived class. The private members of the base class cannot be inherited in the derived class. The protected members of a base classes stay protected in the derived class. Now we'll study the private inheritance. The public members of the base class becomes the private members of the derived class. The private members of the base class cannot be inherited in the derived class. The protected members of the base class stay protected in the derived class. Now we'll study protected inheritance. the public members of the base class become protected in the derived class. The private members of the base class cannot be inherited in the derived class. The protected members of the base class stay protected in the derived class. Now we will study the levels of inheritance. There are 5 different levels of inheritances. The first one is single level inheritance, and the second one is multi-level inheritance, and the third one is multiple inheritance, and the fourth one is hierarchical inheritance, and the fifth one is hybrid inheritance. Now let us continue with the first one, that is single level inheritance. If a class is derived from the single base class, then it is called as single level inheritance. Here you can see one base class and one derived class, and similarly in an example, father and properties of father is inherited to son. Next is multi-level inheritance. The classes are inherited from the classes which are already inherited from the other classes. So such inheritance is called as multi-level inheritance. Here you can see base class is again inherited properties to derived class 1. Again derived class 1 will get inherit the properties to derived class 2, and this procedure will be continued. So here you can take example of grandfather, then the properties of grandfather is inherited to father and properties of father is inherited to son. Now we'll study multiple inheritance. A class is derived from more than one class is called as multiple inheritance. Here you can say base class 1, base class 2 and so on. N number of base classes will inherit only one derived class. And next we'll take the example. Here you can see king and queen and prince. Properties of both king and queen is inherited to the prince class. Here king and queen are both the base classes and prince is the derived class. Now we'll study hierarchical inheritance. If the number of classes are derived from the single base class, then such inheritance is called as hierarchical inheritance. So here you can see example base class, and then we have got derived class 1, derived class 2 and derived class 3 and so on. Now let us take example. Here staff is inherited to lecturers, and then it is inherited to office staff, and then it is inherited to group D staff. Now we will study hybrid inheritance. Hybrid inheritance is a combination of both hierarchical and multiple inheritance. Here you can see base class, derived class 1 and derived class 2, which will in turn will get inherited to one more derived class. That's all in this video. Thank you very much for watching this video. We will see you in the next video.